So it's almost the standard here is one of continuous improvement. The standard is one of always seeking a little bit better, a little bit more. Small steps perhaps, but not to be satisfied with, oh, we've made it.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Rob from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus.
And the question is, how do leaders create a productive workforce? One of the most frequent questions we get when training or coaching managers and leaders is, so what do leaders actually have to do? Is there something like a job description, just so I know that I'm doing all the right things? We researched this and found lots of different opinions about parts of the leader's role, but nothing that brought all of the aspects together in a way that succinctly answered the question. So we built our own model, bringing together the ideas of a disparate set of thought leaders on leadership. The model breaks down the role of a leader into 3 areas: purpose, people, and productivity, with each of these areas broken down into a further 3 steps. This podcast is focused on productivity and the role of leaders in creating focus on how we do what we do and how they can continually improve and drive efficiencies. So, how do leaders create a productive workforce?
One of the things I like about this part of the model, this kind of part about process, is the acknowledgement that leaders are kind of almost in this yet another sort of schizophrenic fight between conformity and change. So, actually productivity in the short term is about efficiencies, it's about conformity, it's about making things stable. I always think of the sort of the neurological version of that, where the brain is just processing it because it takes so little energy. So you just do it without thinking. Yeah. And that's kind of what leaders are trying to do. Yeah. And yet at exactly the same time, they're trying to make things different to what they were before to adapt to changes in the environment and things going on. So it's this constant, be smooth, be efficient, do it the same way every time, but tomorrow do it differently. And you can sort of see that's why, a lot of people get really confused, because some people are really good, I think, at the conformity side and the kind of lean and efficient type, let's just make it the same every time.
Yes.
And some people are good at this sort of creative and change bit, but very rarely are people comfortable with doing both.
Well, and I think there's another reason for them not being comfortable in doing both, Paul, and that is because we are creatures of habit. We are people, we are creatures of sort of comfort in the fact that if we know what we're doing, if the job today is the same as the job yesterday, great. We don't have to engage too much energy or cognitive power in doing anything differently because we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And yet if we're sort of suggesting, oh, hang on a second, but we can do that better, then it's go, whoa, hang on a second, that means I have to think again. That means I have to come up with a different or improved way of doing things. So I think it does play to a natural tendency for individuals to go, but hang on a second, you're just disrupting what I know to be my job.
Yeah, and you look at how we're designed as humans, it's not natural.
No.
We're designed to seek out conformity, to seek, change is risky, it's unsafe, it's got uncertainty in it, all of the things that most of us don't like.
Yeah.
We like assurance, we like certainty, we like risks to be I'm not trying to think of the right words. We don't care if there are risks, but we want risks that we can manage and control.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like it can be a little bit scary, but for goodness sake, don't make it big. Don't make it too scary.
I always think about it. It's like everybody likes fast cars, but really most of us like fast cars with seat belts and some and airbags, and so I think that skill of a leader to lead people on these 2 opposing journeys at exactly the same time.
So that basically means that what we're talking about here is that leaders are responsible for creating stability, but also leaders are responsible for driving change.
Yes.
And those 2 don't sit comfortably together.
No, they're not happy bedfellows, are they? I can remember talking, whenever we've run leadership programs and you talk to people about this concept, they intuitively get it. And then they look at you like, yeah, but I don't like that. I want to pick one side. And some people love the change side. Some people just love going in there and creating chaos and mixing it up and see what happens. And some people are, go, not for me. I want the stability. But the reality is, if you're in a leadership role, the expectation is you can do both.
Yes. And well, the other reality is that without driving change and improvement, things don't stand still. They actually go backwards.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as standing still. It might, well, there is probably such a thing, but it's temporary. It's, you might stand still for a day, but then you start losing ground.
I also wonder actually if this is one of these sort of pendulum things, whereas if you actually go too far to the other side, and you create too much change, you also go backwards.
Yeah,
because you don't get any efficiency because it's just a constantly moving target. It's about some sweet spot between the two that says, I'm moving this forward, at the right pace.
And a perfect analogy for me, and I know that there's lots of stuff written on this, especially in the world of sport, and with Olympic rowers and all the rest of it. But I used to row. That was my sport when I was in school and in sort of into my 20s.
You went to a slightly better school than I did. That's what I'm saying.
and actually, you could be going in a boat as fast as you possibly could physically as a human being, with your oar in your hand and your legs pumping and your shoulders pumping, and you weren't working efficiently, so the boat wasn't moving in a sweet, comfortable, efficient and effective way. And it was hard work.
Yeah.
And you would see other people who have got the motion and the timing and the balance and everything spot on, and they didn't seem to be putting the effort in, but the boat was shooting forward. So, it's a very, just to illustrate the point that you made really nicely, that for me immediately conjured up that sort of panic-stricken person who's been overtaken in a boat trying to go faster and completely doing the wrong things because they're doing too much change in a completely disjointed and uncoordinated way and not making any progress.
Yeah, and so the skill in that situation, and I think it's the skill in of leadership generally, is to go, how do I focus the change efforts on exactly the right places at exactly the right time, and everywhere else create as much stability as possible, so that I create this lean, efficient, very slick machine that is constantly improving and getting better and tweaking itself.
So part of the role here then is to have a standardized or a series of standardized ways of working, but almost with a constant inquiry about, but how could we do that even better? And now that we've got to this point, how could we do that even better? So it's almost the standard here is one of continuous improvement. The standard is one of always seeking a little bit better, a little bit more.
Yes.
Small steps perhaps, but not to be satisfied with, we've made it. We've got to the ultimate way of doing something, conformity, whatever it happens to be.
And I think that, again, requires, and this is where, again, we're back in the model, linking to other bits of the model.
Right.
But to do that, you've got to go back to purpose and go, well, what is it we're trying to do then?
Yes.
How do I know I'm moving this in the right direction? And whether that's continuous improvement, whether that's incremental or transformational change that you're trying to put in place,
right.
The role of the leader here is to go, I'm only going to move this as much as I need to. I don't need to stick oars in the water all over the place, to use your rowing analogy, just to see what happens, because that will slow the boat down.
Yeah. So there's room for error here, isn't there? So, thinking about some of the mistakes that are very easily made, one of those, and we've touched on it, I think, a couple of times in things that you've said and I've said, is focusing on one side of this. So we're focusing too much on standardization, for example, and ignoring the change element, or vice versa. Focusing on one element only is a absolute possible mistake.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you have to recognize as a leader that and this slightly comes down to personality. If you look at personality through the big five, one of the personality elements is this idea of openness to experience. How much do we crave the new as opposed to the traditional?
Right. And
each of us is slightly different. And depending on where we fit in our personality, and there's going to be some cultural influences of where we are in the world, and some societies are much more traditional and stable than others. But you can imagine, if I'm a leader with a high proportion, high propensity to change, I like new things, in a culture that likes new things, I'm probably going to swing way too much in terms of, not being processized and efficient enough. I'm not going to give people the stability that they need to be able to just get on and do the things they're doing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if I could be the other end of the spectrum and I could just be going, almost protecting the status quo at every step of the way, because I'm very comfortable with, I have this process and I've made it work, and look, I'm hitting my metrics, without recognizing that actually the world is moving around me. I'm not an island.
Yeah.
I've got to keep whatever I'm doing in balance with the ecosystem that I live within.
No, I get that. So, and talking culture, and we could bring that cultural bit into sort of a very sharp focus, very sort of small sphere of influence. What about the clash between what the leader thinks of something and the way that they want to view it, and the way that the teams view that? So the balance might be completely at odds. The team might believe one thing, the leader believes another thing, and there's a clash in the culture of that team as a result.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, at the end of the day, to a certain extent, you can describe the leader as a professional change agent in many ways. The leader is taking responsibility of going, I will work out what needs to be different between now and hitting whatever destination or purpose we take.
Yeah.
And so if you're leading this, you are always going to be 2-3 steps in front of what the people behind you believe is necessary.
Yeah.
And this sort of battle between, conformity and change in a big organization is almost we separate the two roles out, and we tell the junior end of our management structure to focus on the conformity end,
mm-hmm.
and the sort of middle to senior end to focus on the change side.
Yeah.
And therefore that's going to create a lot of conflict.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you've got one group of people going, well, hang on, my targets are to hit these numbers in, day out, keep everything running, keep the machine running. And you keep changing the machine around. You keep sticking screwdrivers in it. And, just because you're my boss doesn't mean you get to screw the machine up.
No, absolutely. And not only that, if you think, some of the messaging that goes on, in fact, probably the majority of messaging that goes on whilst change is being implemented is, we can't allow the numbers to drop. We can't allow productivity to drop. Yes, we're introducing these changes, but you also have to do, as well as you were doing yesterday, even though I'm trying to get you to do a new way of working, those two things are completely at odds as well, in terms of being able to process that cognitively for an individual.
Yeah, so you end up with this situation where actually, if I'm at the bottom, if I'm on, each side of that process are now both aligned and incentivized to pick a side.
Yes.
My targets are to keep this thing stable and not mess it around. Your targets are to move it forward and improve it. We're now being driven in different directions, probably for very good reasons. And so actually part of the role here of the leader is to then bring that together and make it fit and gel.
Absolutely. I saw a brilliant example of this in a food manufacturing firm who were going down the route of lean, and everyone was recording the data religiously on their Kanban boards, but nobody really knew the reason behind it. And the change team leaders were still doing their black belt training, and all the data was there, but nobody used the data for the purpose that it was intended. All they knew was that they had to record the data. And when you spoke to the guys on the floor who were recording the data, they go, "Yeah, but that's great. So what are you doing that for?" And they go, "No idea. We were just told that's what we had to do, so we have to do it." And in fact, I wish we didn't have to do it, because it takes an extra 15 or 20 minutes out of our work. The work that they recognise. So, that conflict was loud and proud there just because of miscommunication.
And that's really interesting, because I think that's the other mistake in this process area that I often see leaders make, which is they get too involved when they get into this sort of change and drive and or efficiency side. It doesn't matter which side they're in. They get too involved in the how and the what we're going to do.
Right.
And I think actually there's a trick here, because if you can get the team to understand where you're going with this, mm-hmm. whichever side you're on, whether it's to make it more efficient and leaner and smoother and more standardized, or it's to go the other way and tweak stuff, if the team are involved, they're going to help you work out how to do it and how to implement it.
Yeah.
But if you're telling them how to do it and how to implement it, you're removing autonomy, you're removing engagement, you're taking so much out of that situation.
Yeah.
That And the risk is that you're also moving all the accountability for getting it right to you.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And how many times have we heard that in various teams go, well, yeah, but if all goes wrong, we know who to blame.
Yeah, because one person has decided to tell everybody how it's going to work. And so everybody's going, all right, fair enough, you're the boss.
Yeah.
And, you and I have run workshops where people have gone, well, I kind of always knew it wasn't going to work. And they list off the reasons. And you go, did you tell anybody that? Well, no one asked. No one cared. So I think, again, there's a real kind of thing that a leader needs to do, which is actually you can't do the productivity piece of your leadership role without absolute clear understanding of purpose and also a clear relationship to people.
Yeah.
These three things have to work together.
Which to me sounds like we're going down the route of, here's some guidance that we can give you then. Here's some advice. Here's some tips. So if we talked about that for just a minute or two, linking back to the purpose has got to be a critical element to this. You've talked about referencing this back into the model. There's no way that we can do any part of our sort of leadership model without the impact on other parts of it. So purpose is a critical area here, because if we're going to drive change, it's going to be far more purposeful and easier to do and more effective if everyone understands exactly what we're doing it for.
This is a really weird analogy, and it's probably because you were talking about rowing, but this is how it's in my head, so I'm going to go with it. And if this doesn't work, hopefully whoever edits this can sort it out. So this is the final podcast. Assume it's working. Purpose for me is like the anchor,
right?
That if you've got a really solid purpose, you can throw it in the water, and you're going to bob around from side to side, but it's never going to let you get too far away from what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you might float off down the chain side for a while, but then you run out of chain, I guess, and then you'll float back to the stabilization side for a while, and then you'll run out of chain. But what you won't do is ever break away and just float off in one direction.
Right.
And I think why purpose is so important in leadership is there are so many of these dichotomies that you face in leaders, and this one here is between stability and change. But we've done other podcasts which talk about, am I an expert or am I the boss? And there are so many of these areas where you're faced with two opposing forces.
Right.
And you need something to hold you center ground so you don't drift off in any particular direction. And that's the role of purpose.
No, that works for me. I think the analogy around anchor works. So that's an easier job for the editor. And then I guess another thing to really concentrate on or focus on is to make sure the connection between how you actually do things and the purpose, and I know I'm still on the same agenda, is clear. So that the how-to, the tactics, are seen more as a sort of an means to an end, get that the right way around, rather than the reason for being here. So in other words, we're not concentrating on the goals and the objectives, the day-to-day tactics. We're actually focusing on, we're only doing these things because it's going to get us to the purpose.
I agree. I think, we talk about this in the purpose one, where we see people are aligned too low down to the purpose. So they're aligned to what they do, not why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. Change is so hard, because you're fundamentally saying you are what you do, not why you're here.
Yeah.
And therefore what you do isn't good enough anymore. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist for people then to go, oh, they're saying I'm not good enough anymore. So they fight back. Whereas if you say, hey guys, we're desperately trying to go over here, I found a quicker way. Most people are up for that. It doesn't feel quite so hard from a change perspective. So I think, it's kind of aligning everything up to go, do I understand how this process isn't fundamental to who we are? What it is something that helps us do this for our customers or for our reason for being or delivers something to another part of the organization, whatever that may be. I think that's really key.
That causes me to think about, and I'm borrowing very heavily from something you said about 5 minutes ago, if we're going to align everything together, one of the key things to align is people. So the example that I was thinking about is that, we were with an organization, still working with them, but 3 or 4 years ago, where a new position was created in the organization of head of continuous improvement, head of CI. And what he wanted to do right from the outset was he didn't want to be the only person in the organization associated with CI. So he spent the first year of his tenure making sure that everybody in the organization knew exactly what continuous improvement was all about, so that they could be part of it, they could own it, and everybody was aligned behind that continuous improvement process piece. Because otherwise, and it was the point that you made earlier about removing autonomy from the team, everybody felt a sense of engagement. So everybody was in, and I'm bringing back the boat again, everybody was in the same boat, going in the same direction, and absolutely enormously important to have people engaged right from the outset.
Yeah, that's a really, really valuable thing to do, that you're bringing people on that journey and bringing people into this world, which is it is challenging. Let's be really honest. I think that leads me very nicely to my last tip, which is accept the dichotomy of the situation.
Right.
The number of people I've met who fight it, who go, but I'm supposed to make it more stable or reduce uncertainty or do this, or I'm supposed to make it better and it's all about change. And you go, no, it's not. It's about finding the balance between these two that works for your team, in your business, in your ecosystem. And that might be different for you than it is for even the team. We work with some multinational businesses and you go, look, you might have to accept it's more about stability for you, and that country over there might accept it's more about change for them, because you're in different places right now. And it's just that the second you try and pick a side in this fight, you lose.
Yeah. It's not one or the other, it's both.
Yeah, and that's the role of a leader here, is to balance that both and constantly adjust, back to your rowing thing, constantly adjust what the boat is doing.
Yeah.
Because actually it doesn't matter how you're doing it. What matters is, are you winning the race? Are you getting to the finish line?
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus, and I'm just tagging on the end of this podcast to let you know where you can find more about the leadership model we've been talking about today. If you'd like to know more, maybe see the model in its entirety, or download some free coaching resources to help you think about your leadership style, and then go to www.thinkingfocus.com/what-is-leadership. That's thinkingfocus, all one word, .com/what-is-leadership.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.